to invite Tina to come forward. Tina, Dacin, and Wren Montgomery have co-authored this particular paper. I think I saw Wren in the room. Just ask Wren and we'll just do a raise for right now.
So Wren is sitting at that far corner, and Tina, Dr. Dacin is presenting. Thank you.
So thank you, Yolanda. And as Yolanda has introduced Wren, this is joint work, and it's actually driven by Wren as part of her graduate work at the School of Business. And I want to just thank the Monieson Centre as well as Palace CFDC and Shirk for supporting this work, and it's a great opportunity to be here and present this sort of very nascent project. It's in a very early phase. We've just started to conduct our interviews this fall. We've actually, when you're studying incubation and there are small incubators, it doesn't take you long to finish your data collection, but we are hoping to add many, many more to our sample, and since this is an emerging area, we're very excited to have this opportunity to get your input. And with that said, what I'd like to do is at the end of my presentation, I'd love to open it up to hear your suggestions, because we're really looking for help and assistance from all of you. You're the experts in the room here, and to give us ideas of things that we should be looking for and perhaps exploring even more deeply within this context. So if I could ask you for your assistance and help in that, that would be great. Okay, so we have 3 research questions that we were really interested in. One was, what are the pathways to innovation and prosperity in rural economies? This was a very broad, general question that we started looking at almost 2 years ago when we went into Prince Edward County originally and then to some other rural areas. The next is, what is the nature of incubation in a rural context? So how does it work in this setting, and what are the key success factors, but also the key specific challenges that organizations face? And then what resources can and must be leveraged in this context? So when we look at these questions, you know, it's building on some wonderful papers and work that we've heard already this morning. So Nirvana, your presentation, you know, earlier, and then listening to Greg and Kevin talk about resources, and Elspeth as well talk about unfair advantage. So lots of really good stuff. I want to build on one point that Greg just mentioned, though, is the importance of context. And embeddedness is really, really key here, and to understand how organizations, activities, people are embedded in that local context. And what is unique and special about that that actually makes a lot of these initiatives and strategies work and differentiated from things that we would see in an urban context. So to put that in perspective, I want to mention that this is part of 2 larger projects that we have. One is looking at cultural sustainability, geography, and heritage more broadly. And we've been looking at conservation, preservation, and creation of material. I'm an institutional theorist. I study things like institutional residue, and I like to look and see how people resurrect those types of things in business settings or in rituals and traditions that they enact in communities. The other is to look at, we've been looking at for several years now, social incubation in an urban context. Looking at social innovation, we've been housed at a center in Toronto for the last few years and collected lots and lots of data of how incubation works and what happens when you put like-minded social change agents together and how they resolve needs for local communities. And we thought it was really quite interesting to try and take some of those insights into this local community. And when Craig spoke to us about some of the things happening in Prince Edward County, we thought, okay, that this is a pathway that we need to explore much, much more deeply and try to understand. So it'll help us nuance our understanding there, but also create some new insights in this rural region. So we've studied data, we've done interviews with 3 sites at the moment. So the Headlands Project in Prince Edward County, Idea Hub in Port Hope, and Haliburton Creative Business Incubator in Haliburton. So we've been collecting data at these 3 sites, and this is, as I said, very preliminary work. In terms of pathways to prosperity, incubation is just one, and I wanted to highlight some of the others that I think are important as well. So one is just getting outright subsidies or grants to start enterprises. The second is to have business plan competitions, which I think is a really, really valuable pathway for organizations to consider. And the reason is that you generate a lot of great ideas very, very rapidly and quickly, but you get a lot of people who are highly motivated because people love to win at those competitions, right? So you get young people, groups of people, and people learn to team up and partner. But the other thing with business competitions that's a really interesting pathway is that it generates a lot of experimentation and trial and error in a safe place, in a safe zone. And that, I think, is really key, and I know that there's some work going on here in Queens in that area. The other is community events, and while we talk about festivals and fairs, I want to think about it as not just a tourism vehicle, but also as a way that it generates local community. So there's another spillover effect or a byproduct that occurs from having those festivals and fairs and other types of events. Finally, cross-sectoral collaboration, training, and advising is another mechanism towards prosperity. And if anyone has been to Toronto in the last 5 years and seen the efforts of the Toronto City Summit Alliance, it's a project that we've written on to look at the efforts of bringing people together across sectors. Very, very interesting initiative, and we can see that also being of use in local communities. So let me turn now to incubation. So this is what we know on incubation more generally, and the literature on incubation is quite diverse. It's not really that great. There's just very difficult to take a lot of insights from. I was someone who studied alliance research for years and years, and I used to say the same thing about research on alliances. There's a lot of it, but it's not great. And so what can we take away? Well, one is that it's a very powerful economic development vehicle. There's shared services, scale economies. There's knowledge mobilization that occurs in incubation. A lot of trial and error and learning from others. And one thing we do know is that there's been mixed success of firms that come out of incubators. One insight, though, that some research has shown is that firms that are incubated actually survive better or have higher success rates. Okay, smaller organizations that come out. But for us, the issue was about why rural incubation and why is that important. So the big thing to think about, why is rural incubation necessary and why is it important? Well, one is that, yes, there is access to shared services. When you have to maneuver geography, it's very, very important to figure out how you can do that. Some of the people that we interviewed actually talked about having access to bandwidth, like business level bandwidth, inside of an incubator that they wouldn't have in their own homes. Access to community resources is also extremely key. And then scope benefits, byproducts, spillover effects to the community is also essential. The other thing is that you find is that in rural incubation, in contrast to urban incubation, you have people having dual mission or dual objective. So they care about their business, but they also care about the community. And I think that duality of mission is actually a really, really key benefit, and we'll talk later about why we think this phenomena actually has legs for rural communities. So it has benefits for the enterprise. So we've touched on the issue of resources, tangible and intangible. But another thing I think that's very critical is that it has legitimacy and professionalism that it provides people. So rather than working in the basement of your home, some of the folks said that now they can actually charge the upper end of a market rate because they have an office space to go, and they're regarded as not sort of fostering a hobby, but in fact they're fostering a business entity. So it's that legitimacy and professionalism that space will give them. The other thing is that there's reputational benefits that also occur from this. And this is for the incubator, but also for the enterprise itself. Collective identity is also another very, very key thing that occurs, because as people share space and community, the community gets built inside the incubator as well as outside. Now, this is something that Kevin and others talked about this morning, as well as the attraction and retention of local talent. So one of the things we're finding is that in this area, especially in the one in Prince Edward County, a lot of people talked about the fact that the schools are generally empty. So if we look at a vehicle of bringing people back, having a ready resource like this where people can come in and they can park themselves, it makes sense. All right, benefits for the community. The big issue we found was creating self-esteem for local business owners, an entrepreneurial culture. There's been a lot of work, especially in economics, about entrepreneurial clusters. And if we look at research done in Italy and in California, people have talked about how creating entrepreneurial clusters actually benefits the local rural economy, but also has spillovers in many, many other ways. And so, you would see that as well. Attraction and retention of talent, we've talked about that now there's a reason for people to want to come back to the region. Now for government, what are the benefits of getting involved in something like rural incubation? And so as a policy